Hola, my name is Maddie Hannon. I'm an undergraduate research assistant at Michigan State University, and I work with Dr. Silvina Bongiovanni in the Department of Romance and Classical Studies. Today I am presenting on interdialectal perception of assimilated trills and palatal fricatives in Argentine Spanish. Spanish is a language spoken natively by over 543 million people, but not all speakers use the same sounds of Spanish. This led me to wonder how well speakers of different dialects can understand one another. Previous literature reveals that this is not a naive question. There are multiple factors that influence interdialectal speech perception, including the listener's own phonemic inventory, social networks, dialect contact, and even geographical proximity. So, we narrowed in on Argentine Spanish due to its richness in linguistic variation in order to investigate how Spanish speakers perceive Argentine dialectal variants. We are interested in investigating two key variants in Argentine Spanish. They are variants of the standard trill, r, and the palatal obstruent, j. The standard trill is represented orthographically by r and double r, as in rubia and barra. Interestingly, in North and Central Argentina, the standard trill is pronounced as an sibilated trill, that is, with more of a whistle or S sound, as in shrubia. The palatal obstruent, j, is represented orthographically by Y and double L, as in lluvia and baya. This sound also undergoes variation in Argentina in a similar way to the trill. It picks up fricative qualities and becomes a palatal fricative, such as in lluvia. These two variants, the sibilated trill and the palatal fricative, are the sounds we are interested in investigating perceptually. Perception of the sibilated trill and the palatal fricative has been investigated only once in Argentina. Gandolfo in 1964 carried out a perception study between dialects with the sibilated trill and without the sibilated trill, and she found that the sibilated trill and the palatal fricative are confoundable between dialects who map these two similar sounds to different letters. Let's take a listen. Here we have the palatal fricative in lluvia, rain.
Lluvia, 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 lluvia.
And now, the sibilated trill in rubia, blonde.
Rubia, 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 lluvia, rubia, rubia.
Once more together.
Lluvia, rubia.
You may notice that these two words sound quite similar, yet they have different meanings. Our current pilot study is based off Gandolfo. We have three main research questions going into our cross-dialectal perception study. 1. Are Spanish speakers able to accurately identify the trill, the sibilated trill, and the palatal fricative? 2. If we compare identification accuracy between Spanish dialects with and without fricatives, do we find differences? 3. If we compare among Argentines, do we find that reporting contact with sibilated trill dialects leads to higher accuracy rates? We propose three corresponding hypotheses to our research questions. H1. No, Spanish speakers will not accurately identify all of the variants. H2. Yes, we expect to find differences between Spanish dialects with and without fricatives. Specifically, the dialects with fricatives will perform better. H3. Yes, reported contact with the sibilated trill dialects will result in higher accuracy rates. For this pilot study, we recruited 121 native Spanish speakers, 69 of which were from Argentina, and the other 52 participants were from other Spanish-speaking countries. All participants voluntarily participated in an online survey that consisted of 3 parts: a short training, an identification task, and a language background questionnaire. All 52 of our auditory stimuli were recorded by one female talker from Argentina who has the sibilated trill in her inventory. The stimuli consisted of minimal pairs, or pairs of words that differ by only one sound. In this case, our target sounds, the trill and the palatal. For example, reno and lleno form a minimal pair because they are different by only one sound. Each participant heard 15 target words, 5 of each variant, and 30 distractor items. In the identification task, the participant heard one stimuli and was asked to choose between two options of which word they heard. The goal of this task is to determine how well listeners can accurately map dialectal variants to their corresponding letters. For example, if the listener heard the sound zh, the palatal fricative, they would map it to y or double L. And if the listener heard the assimilated trill, sh, they would map it to r or double R. Our general results indicate that all speakers accurately map the standard trill to its corresponding letter, R. No surprise here. We only had one misidentification of the standard trill out of all 602 trials. On the other hand, listeners were tripped up by the assimilated variant and were sometimes unsure of which letter to map it to. Narrowing the scope to only Argentines, we see slightly higher accuracy in sound-to-letter mapping, a 4.82% increase compared to all speakers. The Argentines function as our dialect with fricatives, which we hypothesized earlier, would show higher accuracy rates in mapping the target variants, which they did. Slightly. Furthermore, still within the Argentine group, we found that listeners who reported contact with an assimilating variety were much more accurate in mapping the assimilated trill to its corresponding letter, R. These findings reflect the patterns found in previous literature of interdialectal speech perception, such as Schmidt 2013, who found that dialect contact has a significant effect on the categorization of sociophonetic variants. Simply having previous contact with the dialect can improve a listener's perception of the variants. Finally, we analyzed the results of listeners who have the assimilated trill in their own speech inventory compared to listeners who do not use this variant in their own speech. We found that listeners who have the assimilated trill accurately mapped it to the letter R 97% of the time, compared to listeners without the assimilated trill in their inventory who were only accurate 63.33% of the time. This is a significant difference. Our results reflect the discoveries of previous literature, such as Delgado-Diaz and Galarza 2015, who found that listeners are much more accurate in perceiving their own variants. Turning back to our hypotheses and stepping into the discovery phase, we confirmed our H1. Speakers did not accurately identify the assimilated trill. We were pleasantly surprised to learn that all speakers categorized the palatal fricative, an Argentine variant, with near 100% accuracy. Our second hypothesis was partially confirmed. Dialects with fricatives only proved to play a role in the categorization of the assimilated trill, while the palatal fricative showed no significant differences across dialects. Our third hypothesis was confirmed. Speakers who reported contact with the assimilated trill mapped the variant to its corresponding letter with 21.62% higher accuracy compared to listeners without dialect contact. In the future, we would like to build off this pilot study by modifying the experimental design. We might add an option for neither in the identification task or request an open-ended response. We would like to incorporate multiple voices into the audio stimuli and test more variants in Argentine Spanish, such as the voiceless palatal fricative. It would also be beneficial to include listeners from other assimilating dialects, such as Andean Ecuador. To wrap things up, our findings reflect the general patterns seen in the previous studies of interdialectal perception, specifically that listeners are more accurate in perceiving their own variants, and that experience with the dialect matters. En fin, our study contributes to the understanding of a sound change in progress within Argentina, namely the loss of assimilated trills in favor of other assimilated sounds. We hope to contribute more to the understanding of interdialectal perception and linguistic change by modifying and repeating this study. Thank you so much for attending my presentation. I would like to thank Dr. Bongiovanni and everyone who participated in the survey. Thank you so much. Bye. original observation of this confoundability.